Most people believe power always announces itself. It arrives in expensive suits, black armored cars, and rooms that fall silent when someone important walks in. But real power sometimes arrives wearing a stained apron and cheap shoes. Angela Rivera knew exactly what it felt like to be invisible. She was 23 years old, working double shifts at a luxury restaurant she could never afford to eat in. La Vittoria was the kind of place where crystal glasses cost more than her rent. The chandeliers alone were worth more than the combined salaries of everyone working in the kitchen. And yet Angela moved through it like a ghost. She carried plates. She refilled glasses. She smiled politely while wealthy strangers snapped their fingers at her like she was a misbehaving dog. The wealthy never looked at her face. They looked through her. Invisible. But Angela had learned something growing up poor. When people believe you are invisible, they stop hiding their secrets. Angela's shift had started 11 hours earlier. Her feet burned. Her back ached. And her mind was running through the same terrifying numbers again and again. Rent due in 3 days. $1,250. Her mother's medication. $600. Electric bill. Another $170. Angela pressed her fingers against her temple as she stood near the kitchen entrance. Her paycheck barely covered half of it. But quitting wasn't an option. Because Angela wasn't just supporting herself. She was supporting her younger brother Matteo too. Their father had died 5 years earlier in a construction accident. Their mother's health had collapsed shortly after. Angela became the provider overnight. College had disappeared. Dreams had disappeared. What remained was survival. And survival meant working until her legs trembled. Angela. The sharp voice snapped her out of her thoughts. It was Arthur Bellamy, the restaurant manager. His usually smug expression looked pale tonight. Which was strange. Arthur never looked nervous. Unless someone important was in the building. Angela wiped her hands on her apron. Yes, Mr. Belly. Arthur leaned closer, lowering his voice. Table 9. Angela frowned. That's not my section. I know. Then why? Because no one else will take it. Angela's stomach tightened. Dumbbell? Arthur looked toward the dining room like a man staring at a storm. Then he whispered the name. Johns. The air seemed to disappear from Angela's lungs. Everyone in New York knew that name. Victor Jones. Officially, he was the CEO of a global shipping company. Unofficially, he controlled half the docks on the eastern seaboard. Smuggling. Arms. Money laundering. Politicians owed him favors. Judges avoided crossing him. And criminals feared him. He was 35 years old. Brilliant. Ruthless. And rumored to have ended more than a few lives personally. Arthur grabbed Angela's shoulder. His usual server fainted in the bathroom. What? She literally passed out. Angela blinked. You're joking. I wish I was. Arthur shoved a tray toward her. Take the water and the wine menu. Angela stared at him. You want me to serve a Mafia boss because the regular waitress fainted? Arthur sighed. You're the only one here who doesn't panic under pressure. Angela raised an eyebrow. That's because customers yelling at me isn't new. Arthur gave a nervous chuckle. Well, try not to spill anything. Angela lifted the tray. Encouraging. The dining room was quiet. Soft jazz floated through the air. Golden candlelight reflected off polished glass. But something about the room felt different tonight. That's like everyone knew someone dangerous had arrived. Angela spotted table 9 instantly. A private booth in the back corner. 3 enormous men in black suits stood nearby like statues. Not guards. And sitting in the center of the booth was Victor Jones. Angela had expected someone older. More theatrical. But Jones looked almost calm. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Dark suit tailored perfectly. Black hair brushed back. Sharp jaw. Cold gray eyes. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't threatening anyone. But the atmosphere around him felt like a loaded weapon. Angela approached slowly. her heart beat steady. Because fear was something she had learned to control. Working in a hospital during her short-lived nursing program had taught her that panicking never helped anyone. Angela stopped beside the table. "Good evening, gentlemen." No response. Jones was speaking quietly to a man across from him. "Your shipment arrived 2 hours late." His voice was low. "How?" Which somehow made it more terrifying. The man across from him swallowed hard. There were delays at customs. Jones leaned forward slightly. We fixed it." Jones stared at him. Silence stretched across the table. Then Jones said softly, "You had one job." Angela waited patiently beside the table. Invisible again. But she was listening. Because listening was a skill Angela possessed in dangerous abundance. Finally, Jones waved a hand dismissively without even looking at her. "Wine list." Angela handed it to him. Jones barely glanced at 1968 Bordeaux. Angela nodded. "Yes, sir." She turned toward the bar. But as she walked away, she noticed something. The man sitting beside Jones had slipped something small from his pocket. A tiny glass vial. Angela's eyes narrowed. He poured a drop into the empty wine glass sitting in front of Jones, then quickly placed the vial back in his jacket. Angela froze mid-step. Her mind instantly calculated possibilities. Her nursing training kicked in automatically. Poison. Not alcohol. Not medication. Too secretive. Too fast. Angela felt her pulse slow instead of speed up. Because panic never saved anyone. But knowledge sometimes did. She walked to the bar, picked up the expensive Bordeaux, and returned to the table. The man who had used the vial watched her carefully. Jones did not. Angela poured the wine slowly. Deep red liquid filled the glass. The poisoned glass. Jones reached for it. Angela moved before she even thought. She slapped the glass out of his hand. It shattered across the marble floor. Red wine splashing everywhere. The restaurant went completely silent. Everyone turned. The bodyguard stepped forward instantly. Jones stood slowly. His eyes locked onto Angela, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You," he said quietly. Angela could feel dozens of eyes on her. The manager looked like he was about to faint. Jones stepped closer. His voice rose slightly. "Are you completely insane?" Angela's heart was beating, but her voice remained steady. "Maybe." Jones's jaw tightened. "Do you have any idea how much that bottle costs?" Angela met his eyes and said the words that would change her life forever. "Shout at me again." Her voice sharpened like steel. "And I'll end you." The entire restaurant froze. One of the bodyguards reached for his gun. The manager whispered a prayer. But Jones didn't move. He just stared at Angela. For a long time. Then something unexpected happened. The anger in his eyes slowly faded, replaced by something else. Interest. Jones looked down at the shattered wine, then at Angela again, and asked one quiet question. "What?" Angela pointed at the man sitting beside him. "He poisoned your glass." Silence exploded across the room. The man's face drained of color. Jones turned slowly toward him and smiled. But it was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that ended lives. For several seconds, no one moved. The shattered glass lay across the marble floor like frozen crimson rain. The restaurant had gone completely silent. Angela could hear the soft hum of the chandeliers above them. She could hear someone across the room slowly setting down a fork. And she could feel the weight of every eye in the building staring at her. Victor Jones did not blink. His gaze remained locked on Angela's face, studying her like a puzzle he had never expected to encounter. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward the man seated beside him. "Is that true?" His voice was soft. "How?" Which somehow made it even more dangerous. The man laughed nervously. "Victor, come on. She's a waitress." Jones didn't smile. The bodyguards hadn't moved either. But the air had shifted. Everyone could feel it. Jones looked back at Angela. "You interrupted my dinner," he said quietly. "You embarrassed me in front of my associates." He took one slow step closer. "And then you threatened my life." Angela didn't step back. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because she understood something about men like Jones. Fear fed them. Calm confused them. "You were about to drink poison," Angela said. "And if I hadn't knocked that glass away, you would have been dead in less than 5 minutes." A murmur rippled through the restaurant. The man beside Jones suddenly stood. "This is ridiculous." "Oh." Jones didn't raise his voice, but the command carried absolute authority. The man sat immediately. Jones turned his attention back to Angela. "How do you know it was poison?" Angela gestured toward the broken glass. "The color of the residue." Jones looked down. Angela continued calmly. "When the vial was poured into the glass, the wine darkened slightly near the surface." Jones's eyes flickered. "You saw that?" "I studied nursing before my father died." Angela's voice remained steady. "There are certain compounds that react with tannins in red wine." She pointed toward the shattered liquid spreading across the marble. "The faint purple sheen on the surface is consistent with alkaloid toxins." The man across the table scoffed. "That's nonsense." Angela ignored him. She crouched down carefully and picked up a broken fragment of the glass. The wine clung to the crystal edge. She held it toward the light. "You see the oily ring?" Jones leaned down slightly. His eyes sharpened. Angela continued. "That doesn't happen with normal wine." Silence filled the room again. Jones straightened slowly. Then he turned his head toward the man beside him. The man's face had gone pale. "You want to explain?" Jones asked. "Victor." Jones raised a hand. One of the bodyguards moved instantly. He grabbed the man by the collar and dragged him out of the booth. The chair toppled backward. The man struggled. "Victor, listen." Jones's expression remained unreadable. "Search him." The bodyguard shoved the man against the wall and began patting down his jacket. Everyone in the restaurant held their breath. Then the bodyguard froze. He pulled a small glass vial from the man's inner pocket. The room erupted in whispers. Jones took the vial. He studied it carefully. Then he looked at Angela again. "Interesting." Angela stood quietly. The manager near the kitchen doors looked like he might collapse. Jones rolled the vial slowly between his fingers. Then he handed it to another bodyguard. "Send this to the lab." The bodyguard nodded. Jones turned back to the man who had been sitting beside him. "You were saying something?" The man's voice trembled. "Victor, this isn't what it looks like." Jones tilted his head slightly. I was being forced." "I The man hesitated. Jones's expression hardened. The pause had lasted too long. Jones gave a small nod. The bodyguard's fist moved so fast Angela almost didn't see it. The man collapsed instantly. The restaurant gasped. Jones exhaled slowly. Then he turned his attention back to Angela. And something surprising happened. He smiled. Not cruelly. Not mockingly. But with genuine curiosity. "You saved my life." Angela shrugged slightly. "I stopped you from drinking poison." Jones studied her again. "Which, under most definitions, qualifies as saving my life." Angela didn't respond. Jones walked toward the broken glass on the floor. He crouched down, examining the wine. "Why did you do it?" Angela hesitated. Because the real answer was simple. Because letting someone die in front of her would have been wrong. But explaining morality to a Mafia boss felt complicated. Still, she answered honestly. Because watching someone get murdered when you could stop it. She met his eyes again. Would make me complicit. Jones stood slowly. Something about his expression had changed. He wasn't looking at Angela like she was a nuisance anymore. Now he was studying her like something rare. Something unexpected. "You threatened me?" Angela crossed her arms. "You were shouting." Jones raised an eyebrow. "So your response to a powerful criminal yelling at you was to threaten his life?" Angela shrugged. I was having a long day. One of the bodyguards almost laughed. Jones didn't, but the corner of his mouth twitched. Interesting. He reached into his jacket. Angela noticed several guests quietly backing away from their tables. Because when Mafia bosses reach into their jackets, people assume guns. But Jones pulled out something else. A black card. Heavy cardstock. Minimal design. Just a name and a phone number. Victor Jones slid it across the table toward Angela. When they fire you tonight? Angela blinked. Call that number. The restaurant manager choked on air. Jones continued calmly. I have use for people who pay attention. Angela looked at the card. She didn't pick it up. I'm not interested in working for criminals. A few people gasped. Jones tilted his head. You're already standing in a room full of them. Angela didn't respond. Jones studied her one last time. Then he nodded toward the door. His bodyguards instantly dragged the unconscious traitor out of the restaurant. Jones paused before leaving. He looked at Angela again. You should keep the card anyway. Then he walked out. The restaurant doors closed behind him, and the entire building exploded into chaos. Arthur rushed toward Angela like a man running toward a bomb. What were you thinking? Angela looked at the broken wine. I saved a customer. Arthur looked horrified. You threatened the most dangerous man in New York. Angela sighed. Yes. Arthur grabbed his head. You're fired. Angela nodded calmly. I assumed that was coming. Arthur pointed toward the door. Get out before something worse happens. Angela untied her apron slowly. She placed it on the table. Then she picked up the black card Jones had left behind. The paper felt heavier than it should. Like a carried weight. Power. Danger. Angela slipped it into her pocket. Then she walked out into the cold night air. She had just lost her job. But she didn't yet realize something much bigger had happened. Because for the first time in years, Victor Jones had met someone who refused to fear him. And men like Jones never forgot people like that. Especially when someone inside his own empire had just tried to kill him. Angela thought she had simply ended her shift. But in reality, she had just stepped into a war. Angela didn't realize how cold it was outside until the restaurant doors closed behind her. The warm glow of lavatoria disappeared, replaced by the sharp wind of a late Manhattan night. Traffic hissed along wet pavement. A taxi honked somewhere down the street. Angela wrapped her thin jacket tighter around herself and began walking. Being fired didn't surprise her. What surprised her was how calm she felt. She had just threatened a mafia boss in a crowded restaurant. And somehow she was still alive. That alone felt like a miracle. But miracles didn't pay rent. Angela shoved her hands into her pockets as she walked toward the subway station. Her fingers brushed against the thick black card. Victor Jones. Just a name. And a phone number. No company. No address. No explanation. Angela pulled the card out and stared at it under the yellow glow of a streetlight. For a moment she imagined what it might mean. Money. Security. Freedom from the constant fear of bills piling up. But that kind of help never came without a price. And Angela had seen enough suffering in hospitals to understand something about powerful men. Nothing they gave was ever free. She slipped the card back into her pocket. Her phone buzzed suddenly. Angela pulled it out. Her stomach dropped when she saw the caller ID. Matteo. Her younger brother. Angela answered immediately. Matteo? There was breathing on the other end. Reviv. Painful. Then his voice. Angela stopped walking. What happened? I messed up. Her heart began pounding. Where are you? Oh. The line went silent. Angela didn't even remember running. She sprinted 4 blocks through traffic, nearly slipping on wet pavement. Her apartment building was an aging brick structure squeezed between 2 laundromats. The hallway lights flickered as she ran upstairs. Her keys shook in her hand. The door swung open. And Angela froze. Matteo was slumped against the wall beside the couch. Blood covered the front of his shirt. One eye was swollen shut. Angela rushed to him. "Oh my God!" Matteo groaned weakly. I tried to handle it. Angela gently lifted his arm. It hung at a terrible angle. Broken. Who did this? Matteo looked away. Angela's voice sharpened. Matteo. They're called the Serrano Group, he whispered. Angela's blood ran cold. She knew the name. Loan sharks. Violent ones. How much do you owe them? Matteo didn't answer. Angela grabbed his chin and forced him to look at her. How much? 40,000. The number hit her like a punch. $40,000. Angela felt the room tilt. They said if I don't pay by Sunday. His voice cracked. They'll come back. Angela grabbed a towel and pressed it against the blood on his forehead. You're going to the hospital. Matteo shook his head. No police. But they said if cops get involved they'll make it worse. Angela closed her eyes. Of course they would. This was exactly how men like them operated. Control. Isolation. Angela's mind raced. $40,000. She didn't even have 400. Then she remembered the card. The thought felt dangerous. But so did doing nothing. Angela helped Matteo onto the couch and wrapped his arm carefully in a makeshift sling. Then she stepped into the hallway. Her hands trembled as she pulled out the card. Victor Jones. She stared at the number for several seconds. Calling him meant stepping into his world. And once someone entered that world, they rarely walked out and changed. Angela inhaled slowly. Then she dialed. The phone rang once. Twice. Then a calm voice answered. I was wondering how long it would take. Angela blinked. You knew I'd call? Jones sounded almost amused. You struck me as someone who doesn't waste opportunities. Angela leaned against the wall. My brother was attacked. Silence fell on the other end. Then Jones asked. Loan sharks? Angela's eyes widened. How did you? I had someone follow you after you left the restaurant. Angela's voice hardened. You had me followed? Yes. That's insane. Jones's tone remained calm. You saved my life tonight. I needed to understand why. Angela rubbed her forehead. Well, congratulations. Now you know. Jones paused. How badly is he hurt? Broken arm. Concussion. And the dead? Angela hesitated. 40,000. Jones exhaled slowly. That explains their enthusiasm. Angela's jaw tightened. I didn't call for charity. No, Jones said softly. You called because you understand leverage. Angela frowned. What? Jones's voice shifted. More serious now. The man who tried to poison me tonight. Angela waited. Was my cousin. Angela felt a chill. What? He controls part of my logistics network, Jones continued. And if he was bold enough to attempt murder in public. Angela finished the thought quietly. He isn't acting alone. Jones seemed pleased. Exactly. Angela leaned against the wall. So what does that have to do with me? Jones's answer came instantly. You noticed the poison. Angela frowned. I told you. No. His voice sharpened. You noticed something trained security and professional bodyguards missed. Angela didn't respond. Jones continued. You were invisible in that room. Angela understood now. People ignored waitresses. Which meant she saw everything. Jones spoke again. I need someone like that. Angela felt the tension building in her chest. And in exchange? Your brother's debt disappears tonight. Angela's breathing stopped. Just like that? Yes. And what do you want me to do? Jones answered calmly. Help me find who inside my organization is trying to kill me. Angela stared down the hallway. This wasn't a job. This was stepping into the center of a criminal war. Why would you trust me? Jones's voice softened slightly. Because you threatened my life over a spilled glass of wine. Angela almost laughed. That's your hiring requirement? It's a very rare quality. Angela closed her eyes. She imagined Mateo being beaten again. Imagined the loan sharks returning. Then she made a decision. One condition. Jones didn't hesitate. Name it. My brother stays out of this. Duh. And if I say no to something? Jones's voice became serious. You always have a choice. Angela nodded slowly. Then she said the words that would change everything. Okay. Jones paused. Then he said quietly, my driver will arrive in 10 minutes. Angela frowned. You're already sending someone? I told you, Jones said. I don't waste time. The call ended. Angela stepped back inside the apartment. Mateo looked up weakly. Who was that? Angela grabbed her coat. Someone who might solve our problem. Mateo looked worried. What did you do? Angela looked toward the window. Headlights were already pulling up outside. She didn't answer. Because deep down, she knew the truth. Tonight she hadn't just called a mafia boss. She had accepted an invitation into a world where power, loyalty, and betrayal decided who lived and who disappeared forever. Angela had never ridden in a car like that before. The black sedan waiting outside her building looked less like transportation and more like a quiet declaration of power. The driver didn't say a word when she approached. He simply opened the back door. Inside, the leather seats smelled new and expensive. Angela glanced once back toward her apartment window. Mateo was watching from behind the curtain, worry written across his bruised face. Angela gave him a small, reassuring nod before sliding into the car. The door shut with a soft, heavy sound. Then the car began moving. Manhattan at night looked different through tinted glass. The city lights stretched endlessly, reflections sliding across skyscraper windows. Angela sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. She wasn't afraid, but she was thinking carefully. Because stepping into Victor Jones's world meant one thing. Mistakes would be fatal. Not embarrassing. Not inconvenient. Fatal. The car eventually slowed. Angela looked outside. A massive building towered above the street. Step. Last. 30 floors of quiet dominance. The sign on the front read, Jones Global Shipping. Angela raised an eyebrow. Settle. The driver gave a small smile but didn't respond. Security guards opened the doors as they approached. Inside, the lobby was enormous. White marble floors. Soft lighting. And guards positioned everywhere. This wasn't just a corporate headquarters. It was a fortress. The driver led her toward a private elevator. A security scanner blinked. The elevator doors slid open. Top floor, the driver said. Angela stepped inside. The elevator rose silently. Each floor ticked upward like a countdown. Finally, the doors opened. Angela stepped out. The room waiting beyond looked more like a war room than an office. A massive window overlooked the entire city skyline. Long tables. Multiple computer screens. Maps displayed across digital walls. And several men standing around the room. All of them turned when she entered. Angela immediately noticed the tension. Some of them looked curious. Others looked irritated. One man in particular looked openly hostile. Victor Jones stood near the window. His suit jacket was gone now. Black shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked up as she entered. And for the first time since the restaurant, he smiled. You made it. Angela crossed her arms. You said 10 minutes. Jones gestured toward the room. Everyone, this is Angela. The hostile man spoke immediately. This is the waitress? Jones nodded calmly. Yes. The man laughed once. You brought a civilian into a syndicate security crisis? Jones didn't look at him. Ness. The man's voice sharpened. This is ridiculous. Jones finally turned. His expression cooled instantly. Careful, Daniel. The room fell quiet. Angela realized something important. Daniel wasn't just a random employee. He was someone powerful enough to challenge Jones directly. Interesting. Jones walked toward Angela. Angela, this is my operations council. Angela looked around the room. 5 men, each one dangerous in a different way. Finance, security, logistics, political liaison, and Daniel, the hostile one. Jones continued. One of them tried to kill me tonight. Silence followed. Angela felt every eye turn toward her. Jones leaned against the table. Angela noticed the poison. Daniel scoffed. Lucky guess. Angela tilted her head slightly. Do you always dismiss evidence that quickly? Daniel looked irritated. I dismiss amateurs. Angela walked toward the table. On one of the screens was a shipping manifest. Date. Routes. Cargo containers. Angela studied it silently. Jones watched her closely. Daniel crossed his arms. What exactly is she doing? Angela didn't answer. She pointed at the screen. These shipments. Jones stepped closer. What about them? Angela traced 3 container routes. These arrived late. Daniel rolled his eyes. Shipping delays happen. Angela shook her head. Not like this. She tapped the screen. Look at the pattern. Jones leaned in. The room quieted. Angela spoke slowly. Each delay happened on routes connected to Jones's personal supply chain. Daniel frowned. That doesn't mean anything. Angela continued calmly. Unless someone needed to create controlled disruptions. Jones's eyes narrowed. What? Angela looked at him. To test your response time. The room went silent. Angela continued. Someone inside your organization wanted to know how quickly you would react to operational problems. Jones's expression darkened. Which would tell them how vulnerable your network is during a crisis. Angela finished the thought. Jones turned slowly toward the council members. For the first time, tension appeared in their expressions. Daniel spoke again. You're seriously listening to this? Angela shrugged. You should also check container 77,421. Jones turned back. What? Angela pointed. It arrived 6 hours early. Daniel laughed. Now you're contradicting yourself. Angela shook her head. No. She looked directly at Jones. Early arrivals are harder to notice than late ones. Jones stared at the screen. Then he nodded to one of the analysts. Pull container 77,421. The analyst typed rapidly. A new window opened. Cargo records. Photos. Documentation. Then the analyst froze. What? Jones's voice was quiet. What? The analyst turned the screen. That container doesn't exist. The room exploded into noise. Daniel's face went pale. Angela leaned back against the table. Someone inside the organization had created a fake container record, which meant they had access to the internal logistics database. Jones slowly looked around the room. Angela watched carefully. Because she understood something now. The traitor wasn't just one person. It was someone with authority. Jones turned back to Angela. His voice was calm again. How did you see that so quickly? Angela shrugged. I grew up doing puzzles with my dad. Jones studied her for a long moment. Then he said something that shocked everyone in the room. Angela works for me now. Daniel's voice rose. You can't be serious. Jones's gaze snapped toward him. I don't ask permission. Daniel clenched his jaw. She's a waitress. Jones's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. She is the only person in this room who noticed the pattern. Silence fell again. Jones looked back at Angela. You said you had conditions. Angela nodded. Yes. Name them. Angela met his eyes. I don't hurt innocent people. Jones didn't hesitate. Neither do I. Angela held his gaze. If I see something wrong, I speak. Jones nodded slowly. I expect that. Angela extended her hand. Jones looked at Then he shook it, and in that moment, the invisible waitress became the most unexpected player in a criminal empire. But neither of them realized yet. The real enemy was already standing in the room, watching, waiting, and planning the next move. The tension inside the operations room didn't disappear after Angela shook Victor Jones's hand. If anything, it deepened. Some of the men standing around the table looked impressed. Others looked uncertain. But one man looked furious. Daniel. Angela noticed the way his jaw tightened when Jones announced she would be working with them. She also noticed something else. Daniel hadn't looked surprised when the fake container record appeared. He had looked irritated, as if the problem wasn't the discovery, but the fact that someone else had discovered it first. Angela filed that observation away, because the most dangerous people in a room rarely shouted. They watched. They calculated. And they waited. Jones walked back toward the digital display, locked down every access point to the logistics database. One of the analysts nodded immediately. Already in progress. Jones continued. No one leaves this floor until we know who created that container entry. Daniel scoffed quietly. You think the traitor is standing here? Jones didn't even turn around. I think whoever tried to poison me had help. The room fell silent again. Angela leaned lightly against the edge of the table, observing. Her mind was working quickly. Patterns. Timelines. Motives. She had learned something important growing up poor. When something bad happened, people often focused on the most dramatic moment. But the truth usually lived in the small details before it. Angela spoke calmly. Can I see the personnel access logs? Jones gestured toward the nearest screen. Go ahead. Angela stepped forward. The analyst pulled up the system records. Lines of code. User access timestamps. Employee ID. Angela scanned them slowly. She was the computer engineer. But systems, whether hospital charts or shipping databases, always followed human logic. And human logic left fingerprints. Angela noticed something strange immediately. Multiple logins. But one user account had accessed the system several times in the last 24 hours. Not unusual. Except for the timing. Angela tapped the screen. Who is ID 5473? The analyst checked quickly. That's Daniel's account. The room went still. Daniel's eyes flashed with irritation. Of course it is. I run operations. Angela nodded. That explained the access. Daniel crossed his arms. Tuh. Angela looked at the timestamps again. You logged in at 2:14 a.m. Yes? Then again at 2:19. Daniel shrugged. Working late. Angela turned slightly. But the fake container entry was created at 2:16. Silence. Daniel's expression hardened. That doesn't prove anything. Angela tilted her head. No, but it proves something interesting. Jones finally turned. What? Angela gestured to the screen. The fake entry was created during Daniel's session. The room seemed to shrink. Daniel laughed sharply. You're accusing me now? Angela shook her head. I'm observing data. Daniel stepped closer. His voice lowered. You're way out of your depth. Angela met his eyes calmly. Maybe. Daniel leaned forward. But if you're wrong, you're insulting the man who runs this entire network. Angela shrugged. Then the system logs will prove it. Jones raised a hand. The room quieted instantly. He looked at Daniel. Then at Angela. Then back at the screen. Finally, he said, pull the security footage from the server room. The analyst nodded. A moment later, the video appeared on the large screen. The timestamp matched 2:16 a.m. A door opened. Daniel walked inside. Daniel's face lost color. Angela folded her arms. Daniel spoke quickly. That proves nothing. I had work to do. The analyst zoomed in. Daniel moved toward the computer. Typed something. Then paused. The video froze. Angela noticed something subtle. Go back 5 seconds. The analyst rewound. Angela pointed. Right there. Jones leaned forward. Daniel wasn't alone. For just a moment, another figure had appeared in a reflection of the glass door. Someone standing outside the room. Watching? Angela squinted. Enhance the reflection. The analyst adjusted the video. The blurred reflection sharpened, and the room exploded into noise. Because the reflection showed a face everyone recognized. Victor Jones's cousin. The same man who had tried to poison him. Daniel swore under his breath. Jones's voice became dangerously quiet. Dull. Angela spoke softly. You didn't create the fake container. Daniel glared at her. Angela continued. You just let someone else do it. Jones walked slowly toward Daniel. Each step felt heavy. Controlled. Daniel raised his hands slightly. Vigor, listen. Jones didn't stop. You let my cousin into the server room. Daniel's voice sharpened. I didn't know he was planning to kill you. Angela noticed something interesting. Daniel hadn't denied working with him. He had only denied knowing about the murder attempt. Jones stopped directly in front of him. The room felt electric. You betrayed me. Daniel swallowed. It was supposed to be business. Jones's voice dropped. Explain. Daniel exhaled slowly. Your cousin promised stability. Jones's eyes hardened. He promised control. Angela understood now. Power struggles. Inside the organization, Daniel had sided with the wrong faction. Daniel continued. You've been making changes, Victor. Modernizing things. Expanding operations. Angela glanced at Jones. Daniel wasn't wrong. Change threatened people who benefited from the old system. Daniel's voice grew more desperate. He said if we removed you, the organization would return to the old structure. Jones stared at him. By killing me. Daniel hesitated. Nas? The room fell silent again. Jones looked almost disappointed. You should have come to me. Daniel laughed bitterly. You would have replaced me. Jones didn't deny it. Angela spoke quietly. You still might. Daniel turned sharply toward her. His eyes burned with anger. This is your fault. Angela raised an eyebrow. You walked into a restaurant and suddenly you're part of this world. Angela shrugged. I didn't poison anyone. Daniel's hand moved suddenly. Too fast. He pulled a pistol from inside his jacket. The room erupted. Guards reached for their weapons. But Daniel had already grabbed Angela. The gun pressed against her temple. Everyone stay back. Angela froze. But not from fear. Her mind was racing. Daniel's breathing was uneven. Panic. Desperation. Which meant he was dangerous. Jones didn't move. His voice stayed calm. Daniel. Daniel shouted. You're not untouchable, Victor. Angela spoke quietly. You're making this worse. Daniel tightened his grip. Shut up. Angela sighed softly. You're holding the wrong person. Daniel blinked. What? Angela tilted her head slightly. You think he'll trade his life for mine? Jones's eyes flickered. Angela continued calmly. You betrayed him. You tried to kill him. And now you're threatening someone he met 4 hours ago. Daniel hesitated. Angela saw the doubt. Then she said the one thing that shifted everything. If you want leverage, you should have taken him. Jones's expression changed. Daniel looked at Jones, then back at Angela. And in that single moment of hesitation, Jones moved. The shot rang out. Daniel collapsed. The gun clattered across the floor. Angela stepped back slowly. Jones lowered his pistol. The room was silent again. Daniel was alive, but bleeding. Guards rushed forward to restrain him. Angela looked at Jones. You shot him in the shoulder. Jones holstered the gun. He still knows things. Angela nodded slowly. Then she realized something important. Jones had waited, not because he needed the moment, but because he trusted her to handle it. Jones looked at her quietly. You stayed calm. Angela shrugged. I've worked customer service. For the first time that night, Victor Jones actually laughed. But the war inside his organization was only beginning. The operations floor had never been so quiet. Daniel lay restrained on the ground, his wounded shoulder wrapped in a quick bandage by one of the security men. His face was pale, the anger that once fueled him replaced by a hollow exhaustion. Victor Jones stood near the table, his pistol already returned to its holster. Angela noticed something about him now that the chaos had settled. He wasn't breathing hard. He wasn't angry. He looked focused, which was far more dangerous. Jones turned slowly toward the others in the room. Everyone out. The command came calmly. No one argued. Within seconds, the council members and analysts moved toward the elevator. Security dragged Daniel with them. But before the doors closed, Jones spoke again. Leave him! The guards hesitated. Then they released Daniel and stepped outside. The elevator doors slid shut. Now only 3 people remained in the room. Victor Jones, Angela, and the man who had betrayed him. Daniel laughed weakly from the floor. You're not going to kill me. Jones walked toward the window overlooking the city. You're right. Daniel blinked in surprise. Jones spoke without turning around. You're not worth killing. Daniel frowned. You always said betrayal had consequences. Jones nodded slightly. It does. Angela watched quietly. She sensed something bigger unfolding. Jones turned back slowly. You betrayed me for my cousin. Daniel clenched his jaw. He offered stability. Jones raised an eyebrow. Did it? Daniel didn't answer. Jones continued calmly. My cousin doesn't want stability. He wants control. Angela stepped closer to the table. That's why he tried to poison you in public. Jones glanced at her. Angela continued. A public death creates confusion. Confusion creates opportunity. Jones nodded slowly. Exactly. Daniel looked between them. You're overthinking this. Angela shook her head. No. She walked toward the screen showing the shipping network. This wasn't just about killing Jones. Daniel scoffed. Of course it was. Angela pointed at the map. These routes. Every disruption over the last 2 months happened on lines connected to international shipments. Jones stepped beside her. Angela tapped one of the ports. Lisbon. Then another. Singapore. Then another. Panama. Daniel's eyes flickered. Angela noticed. Your cousin wasn't just planning to take over the organization. She looked directly at Jones. He was planning to sell parts of it. Jones's expression darkened. Daniel laughed bitterly. You think you figured everything out? Angela spoke softly. Not everything. She turned back toward the screen. But enough. Jones folded his arms. Explain. Angela took a slow breath. When powerful organizations change leadership, their enemies look for weaknesses. Jones nodded. Angela continued. If your cousin took over after your death, he would need fast money to secure loyalty. Jones finished the thought quietly. So he planned to sell shipping routes. Angela nodded. To international cartels. Daniel stayed silent now. Jones looked at him. Is she right? Daniel didn't respond. Jones sighed softly. That's answer enough. Angela stepped away from the screen. There is something else. Jones raised an eyebrow. What? Angela crossed her arms. The poison attempt failed. Jones nodded. Yes? Angela continued. But your cousin hasn't run. Daniel finally spoke again. He won't. Jones looked at him. Why not? Daniel smiled weakly. Because he already thinks he is won. Angela's mind clicked instantly. Of course. Jones turned to her. What? Angela pointed toward the logistics screen again. He created fake container records. Jones nodded. Yes. Angela spoke slowly. But fake containers don't just hide operations. They hide movement. Jones's eyes narrowed. You think he's already inside our network? Angela nodded. Somewhere. The room went quiet. Jones grabbed his phone. Lock down every port we control. Angela shook her head. No. Jones frowned. No. Angela stepped closer. If you lock everything down. You warned him. Jones paused. Angela continued. You need him to believe his plan is still working. Jones studied her carefully. What would you do? Angela answered without hesitation. Let him come to you. Jones smiled slightly. That's dangerous. Angela shrugged. So is poisoning someone in a restaurant. Jones chuckled softly. Then he looked back toward Daniel. When is he planning to move? Daniel remained silent. Jones sighed. You're still loyal to him? Daniel's voice cracked. I'm loyal to survival. Angela stepped closer to him. You think he'll let you live? Daniel laughed bitterly. At least he understands the old system. Angela shook her head. No. Daniel looked confused. Angela spoke gently. You were useful. But you failed. Daniel's face drained of color. Jones nodded slowly. She's right. Daniel whispered. He promised it. Jones interrupted softly. Men like him don't make promises. They make deals. Angela watched realization dawn on Daniel's face. He whispered one word. Tonight. Jones's voice sharpened. What happens tonight? Daniel swallowed. He's moving the shipment tonight. Angela and Jones exchanged a glance. Angela asked, which port? Daniel hesitated. Jones stepped forward. You're already finished, Daniel. Your only chance now is honesty. Daniel closed his eyes, then whispered the answer. Pier 12. 3 hours later, the pier sat under cold moonlight. Shipping cranes towered overhead like silent giants. The water moved slowly against the docks. Angela stood beside Jones on the roof of a nearby warehouse. Below them, a cargo ship waited quietly. Lights flickered across the deck. Angela spoke softly. He thinks you're dead. Jones nodded. We're dying. Angela looked toward the ship. Which means he'll come personally. Jones studied her. You're very calm. Angela smiled faintly. I used to assist in emergency surgeries. Jones chuckled. Different kind of operating room. Angela nodded. Footsteps echoed below. A convoy of black vehicles arrived. Men stepped out. And at the center of them, Jones's cousin. Angela whispered. That's him. Jones's eyes hardened. Yes. The cousin walked toward the ship confidently. He had no idea he was being watched. Angela looked at Jones. What now? Jones reached for his radio. Now we end this. Lights exploded across the pier. Armed security surrounded the docks instantly. The cousin froze. Jones stepped onto the railing overlooking the pier. His voice carried across the water. Going somewhere? The cousin looked up slowly. Shock spread across his face. You're alive? Jones's voice was calm. You should have aimed higher. Angela watched the scene unfold. The cousin's men slowly lowered their weapons. They were surrounded. The cousin laughed bitterly. You always were hard to kill. Jones shrugged. You always were predictable. Police sirens sounded in the distance. Angela blinked. You called the police? Jones nodded. I told you I don't hurt innocent people. Angela smiled. The cousin was arrested minutes later. The conspiracy collapsed overnight. A week later, Angela stood again inside Jones's office. The city stretched below them. Jones placed a document on the desk. Everything is settled. Angela glanced at the paper. A bank transfer. More money than she had ever imagined. Your brother's debt is gone. Angela nodded. And this? Compensation. Angela studied him. You don't owe me anything. Jones leaned against the desk. I owe you my life. Angela folded the paper. What if I don't want the money? Jones raised an eyebrow. What do you want? Angela looked out the window, then back at him. A choice. Jones nodded slowly. You always had one. Angela smiled. I know. Jones extended his hand. Today. Angela looked at. Not as a waitress. Not as someone invisible. But as someone who had changed the balance of power. She shook his hand. And in that moment, the invisible waitress became something far greater. Not a queen. Not a criminal. But a woman whose courage forced power itself to listen. Sometimes the world believes power belongs only to the rich, the ruthless, and the feared. But every once in a while, a quiet voice interrupts the room. A person everyone ignored speaks the truth. And suddenly, power has no choice but to listen. Because silence is often mistaken for weakness. But the strongest people in the world are often the ones who were invisible. Until the moment they decided not to be. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe and join us for more powerful stories where the quietest voices change everything.